Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Innocence Lost. Vincent Caldwell had always prided himself on reading people. 20 years in the Marines, followed by a decade building his security consulting firm from nothing, had taught him to spot deception from a mile away. Yet somehow, he'd missed the signs in his own home. Sophie bounded into his home office that Tuesday evening, her 8-year-old face beaming with pride as she clutched a piece of construction paper. "Daddy, I made this for you." Vincent pushed aside the contracts he'd been reviewing and pulled his daughter onto his lap. The drawing was typical of Sophie's work, stick figures with oversized heads and rainbow-colored clothing. But this one was special. It showed their family, himself, Lydia, and Sophie, all holding hands beneath a bright rainbow. "I love it, sweetie," he said, kissing the top of her blonde head. "Let's hang it up right now." As he stood to place it on the cork board behind his desk, his eye caught something in the corner. Tiny words, written in Sophie's careful print. "I'm sorry." A chill ran down Vincent's spine. "Sophie, what are you sorry for?" His daughter's blue eyes, so much like his own, filled with tears. She pointed at the stick figure representing Lydia. "Mommy says this is the last drawing I'll get to make of you." The words hit Vincent like a physical blow. He knelt down to Sophie's level, keeping his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Mommy said, she said you might not live with us much longer. That Uncle Ryan might be my new daddy." Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. "I don't want Uncle Ryan to be my daddy. I want you." Vincent's vision darkened at the edges. Ryan Hoffman, Lydia's tennis instructor, a man who'd been coming to their house for private lessons for the past 6 months. Vincent had trusted his wife, trusted that her sudden interest in fitness was just another of her phases. He pulled Sophie close, inhaling her strawberry shampoo scent while his mind raced. "Listen to me, baby girl. I'm not going anywhere. I promise you that." But even as he comforted his daughter, Vincent was already calculating. He'd built an empire by outthinking his enemies, by being 10 steps ahead of everyone else. If Lydia thought she could blindside him, take his daughter, destroy everything he'd built, she was about to learn exactly who she'd married. After tucking Sophie into bed with extra stories and promises that everything would be okay, Vincent returned to his office. He pulled out a bottle of bourbon and poured himself a generous glass, then opened his laptop. If his wife was planning to leave him, she needed evidence of infidelity, grounds for divorce that would favor her in custody hearings. But Vincent Caldwell hadn't survived 3 tours in Afghanistan and built a multi-million-dollar company by being careless. His personal life was as secure as his business dealings, which meant Lydia was either bluffing or his phone buzzed. A text from his wife, working late at the club again. "Don't wait up. Hugs and kisses." Vincent checked his watch, 9:30 p.m. The country club closed at 9 o'clock. He opened his laptop and accessed the security system he'd installed throughout their house. Cameras that Lydia didn't know about, hidden in plain sight. Vincent fast-forwarded through the day's footage until he found what he was looking for. There, on his dining room table at 2:17 p.m., his wife was bent over while Ryan Hoffman took her from behind. They were laughing, their voices carrying clearly through the audio. "God, I can't wait until you divorce him," Ryan panted. "Vincent's so uptight, so controlling. You deserve better." "Soon," Lydia gasped. "My lawyer says with the prenup, I need to prove he's mentally unstable or abusive. Just a few more weeks of documenting his violent tendencies, and I'll have enough." Vincent's hand tightened around his glass. Violent tendencies? He'd never laid a finger on Lydia in anger, but she was building a case, manufacturing evidence. He continued watching, his expression growing colder with each passing minute. They discussed their plans in detail, how they'd frame him, how they'd take Sophie, how they'd split his assets. Ryan mentioned his debts, his need for Vincent's money. Lydia talked about selling the house, moving to California with Ryan and Sophie. When the footage ended, Vincent sat in silence. Then he smiled, an expression that would have terrified anyone who knew him during his military days. Lydia had made two crucial mistakes. First, she'd involved his daughter in her deception, using Sophie as a weapon. Second, she'd underestimated exactly what kind of man she was trying to destroy. Vincent Caldwell had killed men with his bare hands in defense of his country. He'd built an empire from nothing and crushed competitors who tried to take it from him. He'd never lost a war, and he wasn't about to start now. But this wouldn't be a quick, clean victory. Lydia and Ryan wanted to play games. Vincent would show them what games really looked like. Chapter 2. Gathering Intelligence. Vincent's security company, Caldwell Protective Services, specialized in corporate espionage and threat assessment. His client list included Fortune 500 companies, government contractors, and individuals who paid premium rates for discretion. What most people didn't know was that Vincent's team included former CIA operatives, ex-special forces, and hackers who could penetrate any system. The morning after Sophie's revelation, Vincent called his most trusted operative, Luis Morales, a former Army Ranger who'd served under Vincent in Afghanistan. Luis now ran the company's digital forensics division. "I need a full workup," Vincent said, sliding a folder across his desk. Ryan Hoffman and Lydia Caldwell. Everything: financial records, communications, medical history, parking tickets. "I want to know what they had for breakfast 3 years ago." Luis raised an eyebrow. Lydia's inclusion wasn't lost on him. "How deep?" "Ocean floor." "And Luis?" "This one's personal." "Understood, sir." 48 hours. 24. While Luis worked his magic, Vincent played the perfect husband. He brought Lydia flowers, took her to dinner at their favorite restaurant, and listened with apparent interest as she complained about her difficult tennis lessons with Ryan. All the while, he was cataloging her lies, noting the tells he'd somehow missed before. Lydia had always been beautiful, the kind of woman who turned heads at every social function. She'd been 22 when they met, fresh out of college and working as a gallery assistant. Vincent had been 35, recently discharged from the military and building his business. Their courtship had been intense, their marriage seemingly perfect. But watching her now, Vincent realized how little he'd actually known his wife. The way she touched her throat when she lied. How her voice pitched slightly higher when she was manipulating him. The practiced innocence in her eyes when she spoke about Ryan. She'd been playing a long game, probably from the beginning. Thursday morning, Luis delivered his report. Vincent read it alone in his office, his coffee growing cold as he absorbed the details. Ryan Hoffman was even more pathetic than Vincent had imagined. 31 years old, 2 failed businesses, $127,000 in gambling debts to some very unpleasant people in Atlantic City. His tennis instruction was barely covering his minimum payments. The man was desperate, exactly the kind of weakness Lydia would exploit. But it was the information about his wife that truly surprised Vincent. Lydia hadn't just stumbled into infidelity. She'd been planning this for over a year, systematically documenting everything Vincent did that could be construed as controlling or aggressive. She'd secretly consulted with 3 different divorce attorneys, shopping for the one who'd be most aggressive in pursuing his assets. Most damning of all, she'd been slowly poisoning Sophie against him. The report included transcripts of conversations Luis had recovered from Lydia's deleted text messages, discussions about preparing Sophie for the transition, and helping her understand that Daddy isn't a good man. Vincent closed the file and stared out his office window at the city skyline. He'd built this view through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Every building below represented a client he'd protected, a threat he'd neutralized, a victory he'd earned. Nobody took what belonged to Vincent Caldwell. Nobody. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts, stopping at a name he hadn't called in years. Detective Patricia Grove, now retired but still well-connected in the justice system. Patricia owed Vincent several favors from cases where his company had provided crucial intelligence. "Patricia, it's Vincent Caldwell. I need to discuss a custody matter." Hypothetically speaking, of course. By the end of the conversation, Vincent had a clear understanding of how family court worked, what evidence carried the most weight, and which judges were most sympathetic to fathers who'd been victimized by manipulative spouses. Next, he called his business attorney, Marcus Webb. Marcus had been handling Vincent's legal affairs for 8 years and knew better than to ask unnecessary questions. "I need you to prepare something for me," Vincent said. "A comprehensive post-nuptial agreement. Very specific terms regarding adultery, false accusations, and parental alienation." "And Marcus? I need to look like Lydia's idea." "That's complex." "What's the scenario?" "Marriage counseling. She'll suggest updating our legal arrangements as a sign of commitment. You'll draft something that appears favorable to her, but actually gives me every advantage if she violates the terms." "Vincent, if this is what I think it is, then I'm not asking for anything illegal. Just creative." That evening, Vincent sat across from Lydia at dinner, watching her perform her role as the loving wife. Sophie chattered about school between bites of pasta, oblivious to the war being waged around her. "I've been thinking," Lydia said, her voice carefully casual. "Maybe we should try couples counseling, just to make sure we're communicating properly." Vincent nodded thoughtfully. "That's a wonderful idea. I know exactly the person, Dr. Amanda Rivera. She specializes in high-conflict marriages." What Vincent didn't mention was that Dr. Rivera was also a former client who understood the value of discretion and detailed documentation. "And maybe," Vincent continued, "we should look at updating our legal arrangements too. Show our commitment to making this work." Lydia's eyes lit up, exactly as Vincent had predicted. "You mean like a post-nup?" "Something like that. I'll have Marcus draft something fair for both of us." As his wife smiled and agreed, Vincent felt the familiar calm that came before action. The pieces were falling into place. Soon, Lydia and Ryan would discover what happened when they tried to destroy a man who'd spent his life destroying threats. But first, he needed to secure Sophie's loyalty, not through manipulation like Lydia was attempting, but through truth. Chapter 3. Setting the Foundation. Friday evening, Vincent took Sophie to their favorite ice cream shop, just the two of them. As she attacked a sundae nearly as big as her head, he studied his daughter's face. She had his determination, but Lydia's delicate features, a combination that would serve her well in life if she learned the right lessons. "Sophie, do you remember what you told me about Mommy's drawing comment?" She nodded, suddenly serious. "She said you might not live with us anymore. How would you feel if that happened?" "Sad. Really, really sad." Sophie's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "Daddy, are you and Mommy going to get divorced like Taylor's parents?" Vincent chose his words carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, sweetheart, and sometimes they have to face consequences for those mistakes. But I want you to know something important. No matter what happens between Mommy and me, I will always be your father. I will always love you, and I will always fight to protect you. But what if Mommy says I can't see you? Then Mommy would be wrong, and Daddy is very good at proving when people are wrong." The next week passed in a carefully choreographed dance. Vincent attended marriage counseling sessions with Lydia, playing the role of the confused husband trying to save his marriage. Dr. Rivera documented every session, noting Lydia's subtle attempts to paint Vincent as controlling and volatile. Meanwhile, Vincent's team worked around the clock. Luis had placed surveillance on Ryan, documenting his gambling, his meetings with loan sharks, his increasingly desperate attempts to find money. Vincent's financial investigator traced every transaction in Lydia's accounts, uncovering her secret apartment rental in Manhattan, the love nest where she'd been meeting Ryan twice a week. But Vincent's most devastating discovery came from an unexpected source: Sophie's tablet. Children's devices were often overlooked in security assessments, but Vincent had installed monitoring software on all family electronics years ago. Reviewing Sophie's recent activity, he found something that made his blood run cold. Lydia had been recording their private conversations, father-daughter moments twisted into evidence of psychological manipulation. She'd edited clips to make Vincent's protective warnings sound threatening, his expressions of love sound possessive. Worse, she'd been coaching Sophie on what to say during the eventual custody evaluation. The recording showed Lydia teaching their 8-year-old daughter to lie about feeling scared of Vincent, to claim he had a bad temper, to say she'd rather live with Uncle Ryan. Vincent listened to these recordings alone in his office, his hands steady despite the rage coursing through him. Lydia wasn't just betraying him. She was psychologically abusing their daughter, turning Sophie into a weapon in her war against her own father. That night, Vincent made a decision that would have shocked anyone who thought they knew him. He wasn't going to expose Lydia's plan. He wasn't going to confront her or try to reason with her. He was going to let her proceed exactly as planned, and then destroy her so completely that she'd spend the rest of her life regretting the day she'd chosen to make Vincent Caldwell her enemy. The postnuptial agreement was ready by Tuesday. Marcus had outdone himself, creating a document that appeared to heavily favor Lydia, while actually containing clauses that would trigger devastating penalties if she violated its terms. The adultery clause alone would cost her everything: custody, assets, even spousal support. She'll sign it, Vincent told Marcus during their final review. She thinks she's smarter than me, and if she doesn't, she will. Lydia's greed always outweighs her caution. That evening, Vincent presented the agreement to Lydia during their romantic dinner at home. Sophie was at a sleepover, giving them privacy for their performance. Marcus outdid himself, Vincent said, pouring Lydia a glass of her favorite wine. This protects both of us, but honestly, it's probably more generous to you than I should be. Lydia read through the document, her lawyer's coaching evident in how she focused on specific sections. Vincent watched her eyes light up as she saw the asset distribution clauses, not realizing that they were conditional on her fidelity. "This seems fair," she said finally. "Very fair. I want you to feel secure, Lydia. I want you to know that I'm committed to our marriage, to our family." She signed with a flourish, even initialing the writer about mutual respect and honesty in all marital matters. Later, as Lydia slept beside him, Vincent stared at the ceiling and calculated timelines. By his estimation, Lydia would file for divorce within the next 2 weeks. She'd present her manufactured evidence, demand emergency custody, and try to freeze his assets. What she didn't know was that Vincent had already moved the majority of his wealth into overseas accounts and trust funds that were invisible to U.S. family courts. What remained in their joint accounts was enough to maintain appearances, but not enough to satisfy Ryan's debts or Lydia's expensive tastes. More importantly, Vincent had spent the last 2 weeks documenting everything: Lydia's infidelity, her coaching of Sophie, her fraudulent evidence gathering. He had recordings, photographs, financial records, and witness statements that would not only destroy her case, but potentially result in criminal charges. But Vincent wasn't planning to present this evidence defensively. He was going to use it as a weapon, striking at the perfect moment for maximum damage. The war was about to begin, and Lydia had no idea she'd already lost. Chapter 4. The Trap Springs. Lydia made her move on a Thursday morning, exactly 12 days after signing the postnuptial agreement. Vincent was in his office when Marcus called with the news that divorce papers had been filed. Lydia was seeking emergency custody, claiming Vincent had been increasingly erratic and potentially dangerous. "She's requesting a restraining order," Marcus reported. "Claims you threatened her and Sophie. She has recordings." "I'm sure she does," Vincent replied calmly. "When's the hearing?" "Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Judge Hamilton." "Perfect." Judge Hamilton was known for his no-nonsense approach and his particular disdain for parental alienation. More importantly, he was one of the judges Patricia Grove had recommended as sympathetic to fathers who'd been set up. Vincent spent the rest of Thursday making final preparations. He called his cleaning lady and casually mentioned that she shouldn't be surprised if Mrs. Caldwell moved out soon. He arranged for Sophie to stay with his sister Emma for the weekend, telling his daughter it was for a special adventure, while Mommy and Daddy worked out some grown-up problems. Most importantly, he activated the final phase of his surveillance operation. Ryan Hoffman was about to have a very bad day. At 3 a.m. Friday morning, Vincent's phone rang. It was Detective Grove. "Vincent, I thought you should know. There was an incident at Belmont Park last night. Ryan Hoffman was found beaten pretty severely in the parking lot. Apparently, he owed money to some unsavory characters." "That's terrible," Vincent said, not bothering to sound surprised. "Is he all right?" "He'll live, but he's in the hospital with a broken nose, 3 cracked ribs, and a severe concussion. Probably won't be conscious for a few days. What a shame. Right when Lydia needed him most. Vincent had made a single phone call 3 days earlier to a contact who specialized in debt collection. He'd simply mentioned that Ryan Hoffman might be more motivated to pay his debts if he understood the seriousness of his situation. Vincent never explicitly requested violence, but men like Tommy Castellano had their own ways of communicating with deadbeats. At 8 a.m., Vincent received a frantic call from Lydia. "Ryan's in the hospital," she sobbed. "Someone attacked him. He won't be able to testify today." "Testify about what?" Vincent asked innocently. The divorce hearing. "You know, about your behavior." "Lydia, what exactly was Ryan planning to testify about?" "He's your tennis instructor. What would he know about our marriage?" The pause stretched long enough for Vincent to count 5 heartbeats. He's a friend. He's seen how you treat me." "I see. Well, I hope he recovers quickly." These random attacks are terrible. By 1 p.m., Vincent was seated in family court with Marcus beside him. Lydia sat across the aisle with her attorney, Janet Morrison, a shark who specialized in high-asset divorces. Lydia looked confident despite Ryan's absence, clearly believing her manufactured evidence would be enough. Judge Hamilton was a thin man in his 60s with the demeanor of someone who'd seen every lie family court had to offer. He reviewed the preliminary filings with obvious skepticism. "Mrs. Caldwell, you're requesting emergency custody based on allegations of threatening behavior. I see you have recordings." Lydia's attorney stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We have documented evidence of Mr. Caldwell's increasingly controlling and volatile behavior toward both Mrs. Caldwell and their daughter." "I'd like to hear these recordings." Vincent watched Lydia's face as her attorney played the carefully edited clips. To someone unfamiliar with the context, Vincent's voice did sound harsh, especially when discussing consequences and protection. The clips were skillfully edited to remove context and emphasize perceived threats. "Mr. Caldwell," Judge Hamilton said, "do you recognize these recordings?" "I do, Your Honor. They're from conversations with my daughter about safety and appropriate behavior. However, they've been heavily edited to remove context. Do you have the full recordings?" Vincent smiled. "As a matter of fact, I do." Marcus stood and approached the bench with a thick folder. "Your Honor, Mr. Caldwell's security company maintains comprehensive audio and video surveillance of their home for security purposes. We have the complete, unedited versions of these conversations, plus additional material that provides crucial context." Judge Hamilton's eyebrows rose. "Additional material?" "Video evidence of Mrs. Caldwell coaching their daughter on what to say during custody evaluations, recordings of Mrs. Caldwell's affair with Mr. Ryan Hoffman, and documentation of Mrs. Caldwell's plan to manufacture evidence against Mr. Caldwell." The courtroom fell silent. Lydia's face went white, then red, then white again. "I'd like to see this evidence," Judge Hamilton said. For the next hour, Vincent's documentation played on the courtroom screens. The unedited recordings showed him as a patient, loving father warning his daughter about adult problems. The video of Lydia coaching Sophie was devastating. Watching an 8-year-old being taught to lie about her father brought visible disgust to Judge Hamilton's face. But the coup de grace was the footage of Lydia and Ryan in Vincent's dining room, discussing their plans in graphic detail. When it ended, Judge Hamilton removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "Mrs. Caldwell, do you care to explain what I just witnessed?" Lydia's attorney whispered frantically in her ear, but Lydia seemed incapable of speech. "Furthermore," Judge Hamilton continued, "I note that you signed a postnuptial agreement just 2 weeks ago that specifically addresses adultery and parental alienation. Were you aware of these clauses when you signed?" I didn't. The agreement isn't. The agreement appears quite clear, Mrs. Caldwell." "Mr. Caldwell, what are you seeking in these proceedings?" Vincent stood slowly. "Your Honor, I want full custody of my daughter, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Caldwell pending psychological evaluation. I want enforcement of our postnuptial agreement, including the penalty clauses for adultery and parental alienation. And I want Mrs. Caldwell investigated for filing false police reports and attempting to suborn perjury from a minor child. Judge Hamilton nodded grimly. Emergency custody is granted to Mr. Caldwell. Mrs. Caldwell, you'll have supervised visitation 2 hours per week until a full psychological evaluation is completed. I'm also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. Lydia finally found her voice. This isn't over, Vincent. You can't destroy me like this. Vincent turned to look at his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, with the same expression he'd worn while interrogating insurgents in Afghanistan. Lydia, he said quietly, this is just the beginning. Chapter 5, Psychological Warfare. The weekend after the hearing, Vincent picked up Sophie from his sister Emma's house. His daughter was unusually quiet during the drive home, her small hands fidgeting with her seatbelt. Daddy, she said finally, am I in trouble? Vincent pulled over at a park and turned to face her. Why would you be in trouble, sweetheart? Because of the things I said about you. The things Mommy taught me to say. Vincent's heart clenched, but he kept his voice steady. Sophie, you're 8 years old. It's not your job to understand grown-up problems or to take sides between Mommy and Daddy. You did what you thought you were supposed to do. But I knew it was wrong, Sophie whispered. You never scared me. You never hurt me. Mommy made me practice saying those things, and I knew they weren't true. Vincent unbuckled his seatbelt and pulled his daughter into his arms. You're not responsible for what grown-ups do, Sophie. Not ever. And I promise you, we're never going to put you in that position again. Is Mommy going to jail? I don't know. But whatever happens, you and I are going to be okay. We're going to build a life that's honest and safe and full of love. That Monday, Vincent received 2 calls that confirmed his strategy was working perfectly. The first was from Tommy Castellano. Your friend Ryan is awake, Tommy reported. Seems he's very motivated to discuss his debt situation. In fact, he's so motivated that he's agreed to leave town permanently. Funny thing, he doesn't seem interested in tennis instruction anymore. I'm glad he found clarity, Vincent replied. The second call was from Louise, who'd been monitoring Lydia's communications. She's falling apart, Louise reported. 37 calls to Ryan's phone, none answered. She tried to access their joint accounts and found most of the money gone. Her lawyer is demanding a $50,000 retainer that she can't pay. And her apartment? Lease expires next week. The landlord received an anonymous tip about unauthorized occupancy and noise complaints. He's not renewing. Vincent had spent years studying pressure points, physical, psychological, and financial. Lydia was discovering that her comfortable life had been built on foundations that only existed at Vincent's discretion. Wednesday brought the psychological evaluation report. Dr. Angela Reeves, the court-appointed psychologist, had spent 3 hours with Lydia and emerged with a damning assessment. Mrs. Caldwell exhibits significant narcissistic tendencies and a disturbing willingness to manipulate her child for personal gain, the report read. Her attempts to justify coaching Sophie to lie about her father suggest a fundamental inability to prioritize her child's welfare over her own desires. Continued unsupervised contact with a minor child is not recommended. That afternoon, Lydia appeared at Vincent's office without warning. His security guard called ahead, giving Vincent time to prepare for her arrival. She looked terrible. Her usual perfect appearance was disheveled, her designer clothes wrinkled, her makeup smeared. When she entered his office, she was barely holding herself together. Vincent, please, she said without preamble. Can we talk? Really talk? Of course. Have a seat. Lydia collapsed into the chair across from his desk. I know you're angry. I know I made mistakes. But this has gone too far. I lost the apartment. My lawyer dropped me. Ryan won't return my calls. Ryan's in the wind, Vincent said calmly. Apparently, his gambling debts caught up with him. He left town rather suddenly. You did this. I know you did this. Lydia, I'm a security consultant, not a miracle worker. I can't control other people's poor decisions. Please, she begged. I'll do anything. To stop this. Let me see Sophie. Let me keep the house. Vincent studied his wife's face. 3 weeks ago, she'd been confident in her ability to destroy him. Now she was begging for mercy she'd never intended to show him. You want to see Sophie? He asked. Yes. God, yes. She's my daughter. She's my daughter too. But you try to turn her into a weapon against me. You taught an 8-year-old child to lie about feeling afraid of her father. What kind of mother does that? Lydia's composure cracked completely. I was scared. I thought if I could make you look bad, I could take Sophie somewhere safe, somewhere you couldn't control us. Control you? Lydia, I gave you everything. I trusted you with my home, my child, my life. And you repaid that trust by planning to destroy me. I made a mistake. No, Vincent said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. A mistake is forgetting to pick up groceries. A mistake is being late for dinner. You orchestrated a campaign to alienate my daughter from me, to frame me as an abuser, to steal everything I've built. That wasn't a mistake, Lydia. That was war. What do you want? What will it take? Vincent stood and walked to his window. The city stretched out below him, his city, his domain. I want you to understand something, Lydia. You declared war on the wrong man. I spent my life dealing with people who threaten what I protect. I've never lost, and I've never shown mercy to anyone who tried to harm my family. Sophie is my family too. Sophie is an innocent child caught in the crossfire of your ambition. And I will protect her from you, just like I'd protect her from any other threat. Lydia was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Please, Vincent, I'm begging you. I'll sign anything, agree to anything. Just let me have some part of my life back. Vincent turned to face her. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to continue your supervised visitation with Sophie, 2 hours a week with a social worker present. You're going to move out of my house by Friday. You're going to attend psychological counseling for a minimum of 6 months. And you're going to accept that your decisions have consequences. What about money? I can't afford. According to the post-nuptial agreement you signed, your adultery triggers the penalty clauses. You forfeit any claim to marital assets, including spousal support. You'll receive exactly what you brought into this marriage. Nothing. That's not legal. No judge will. Judge Hamilton already enforced the agreement. You signed it willingly, with full legal representation. It's ironclad. Lydia stared at him, finally understanding the scope of what he'd done. You planned this. All of it. The agreement, the evidence, everything. I defended myself and my daughter against someone who tried to destroy us. If you want to call that planning, go ahead. This isn't over. Vincent smiled, the same cold expression that had terrified enemy combatants in Afghanistan. Yes, Lydia, it is. Chapter 6, Tightening the Noose. Friday arrived with autumn rain that turned the October afternoon gray and cold. Vincent watched from his office window as Lydia's BMW pulled into the driveway of what had been their home for 8 years. He'd given her until 6 p.m. to collect her personal belongings and leave her keys. Sophie was at school, spared from witnessing her mother's final defeat. Vincent had arranged for his daughter to stay with Emma again this weekend while he completed the transition. At 5:47 p.m., Lydia's car disappeared down the street for the last time. Louise appeared in Vincent's doorway with a tablet in hand. Final security sweep is complete. She took clothes, jewelry, and some photographs. Left everything else, including the items that legally belonged to her family. Interesting choice, Vincent mused. Lydia's grandmother's china, her mother's paintings, photo albums spanning Sophie's entire life, all abandoned in her haste to escape. There's more, Louise continued. Her mother called 3 times while she was packing. Lydia never answered. Vincent wasn't surprised. Lydia's parents had always disapproved of her marriage to Vincent, considering him beneath their social status. But they tolerated him for the financial security he provided their daughter. Now that security was gone, and Lydia would have to face their disappointment along with everything else. Monday brought news that both satisfied and concerned Vincent. Detective Grove called with an update on the district attorney's investigation. They're moving forward with charges, she reported. Filing false reports, attempted perjury, and child endangerment. The evidence you provided makes it an easy case. Timeline: arrest warrant should be issued within the week. Vincent, are you sure you want to go this far? She's still Sophie's mother. Vincent stared at Sophie's latest drawing, hanging in the place of honor on his office wall. This one showed just the two of them holding hands in front of a house with a rainbow overhead. No apology written in the corner this time. Patricia, What kind of message does it send to Sophie if I let someone who tried to psychologically abuse her face no consequences? What kind of man would I be if I allowed anyone, to threaten my daughter's well-being without responding? Understand. Just make sure you can live with this. I've lived with worse. That evening, Vincent picked up Sophie from school and took her to their favorite restaurant. Over dinner, he explained that Mommy wouldn't be living with them anymore, but that they'd still see each other during special visits. "Are you sad, Daddy?" Sophie asked, studying his face with 8-year-old intensity. "I'm sad that things happened the way they did," Vincent said honestly. "But I'm not sad that it's just you and me now. We're going to have great adventures together. Can we get a dog?" Vincent laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd had in weeks. "We can definitely get a dog." Wednesday brought the news Vincent had been expecting. Luis burst into his office with unusual excitement. "She's been arrested," Luis announced. "Picked her up at her mother's house in Connecticut." The parents weren't pleased. Vincent felt a moment of satisfaction, followed immediately by concern for Sophie. His daughter would hear about this, probably at school, where children always knew more than adults expected. "Luis, I want you to prepare a security assessment for Sophie's school. If any reporters or social workers try to approach her, I want to know immediately." "Already done. I've also reached out to that private school you mentioned, Riverside Academy. They're very experienced with high-profile custody situations." Vincent nodded. Riverside was expensive, exclusive, and discreet. Sophie would get an excellent education surrounded by children whose families understood the value of privacy. Thursday evening brought an unexpected visitor. Vincent was helping Sophie with homework when his security system announced a car in the driveway. The cameras showed a familiar face, Dr. Amanda Rivera, the marriage counselor who documented Lydia's lies. "Dr. Rivera," Vincent said, opening the door. "This is unexpected. Mr. Caldwell, I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I want to speak with you about Sophie's well-being during this transition." They spoke in Vincent's study while Sophie finished her homework in the kitchen. Dr. Rivera's concerns were professional but pointed. "Vincent, I've been reviewing my sessions with you and Lydia. Your wife clearly had significant psychological issues, and your response has been comprehensive. But I'm concerned about Sophie's long-term emotional health." "In what way?" "Children need stability and predictability. You've removed every trace of her mother from her life very quickly. That can be traumatic, even when the mother was problematic." Vincent considered this. In his focus on protecting Sophie from Lydia's manipulation, had he overcorrected? "What do you recommend?" "Therapy for Sophie, obviously, but also consider allowing her to keep some connection to positive memories of her mother. Not contact given the legal situation, but perhaps some photographs, some mementos. Children need to process these losses, not have them erased." That night, after Sophie was asleep, Vincent retrieved the photo albums Lydia had abandoned. He spent an hour looking through pictures of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family vacations. In many of them, Lydia looked genuinely happy, genuinely loving towards Sophie. The woman who'd tried to destroy him had also been the woman who'd sung lullabies to their daughter, who'd bandaged scraped knees and read bedtime stories. Sophie deserved to remember that version of her mother, even if that woman was gone. Vincent selected several dozen photographs and had them professionally mounted in a new album. On the first page, he wrote, "Memories of Mommy and Sophie's happy times." Friday afternoon, Lydia's bail hearing made the local news. Vincent watched the coverage with grim satisfaction as reporters described the charges against the prominent socialite. Lydia's arrest photo showed her disheveled and desperate, a far cry from the confident woman who'd signed divorce papers 3 weeks earlier. But Vincent's satisfaction was tempered by something unexpected, Sophie's reaction. His daughter had been unusually quiet since seeing the news coverage at a friend's house. That evening, she approached him with tears in her eyes. "Daddy, is Mommy in jail because of me?" Vincent knelt down and pulled Sophie into his arms. "No, sweetheart. Mommy is facing consequences for choices she made, adult choices that had nothing to do with you. But if I hadn't told you about the drawing, Sophie, listen to me. You told me the truth, and truth is always the right choice. What happened to Mommy happened because of what Mommy did, not because you were honest with your father. As Vincent comforted his daughter, he realized that his war with Lydia had produced unexpected casualties. Sophie would grow up knowing her mother was a convicted criminal. She'd have to explain to friends why she only saw her mother during supervised visits. She'd carry the psychological scars of being caught between her parents' conflict. Vincent had won the war, but victory came with a price that would last long after Lydia served her sentence. Chapter 7. The Final Gambit. 3 months after Lydia's arrest, Vincent received a call that changed everything. Sophie was at Riverside Academy, thriving in her new environment, when Janet Morrison, Lydia's former attorney, requested a meeting. "I know this is unusual," Morrison said over the phone, "but I think we need to discuss your wife's situation. There's been a development." They met at Morrison's office downtown, a sleek space designed to intimidate opposing counsel. But Morrison seemed subdued, almost apologetic. "Vincent, I need to be direct with you. Lydia's psychological evaluation in prison has revealed some troubling information. She's been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and severe narcissistic traits. The doctors believe she was experiencing a psychotic break during the period when she was planning the divorce." Vincent said nothing, waiting for the real reason for this meeting. "The thing is," Morrison continued, "the prosecution is considering a plea deal. Psychiatric treatment instead of prison time. But there's a condition. They want assurance that Sophie won't be in danger if Lydia returns to society." "Sophie is never going to be in danger from her mother again," Vincent said flatly. "I believe you. But Vincent, Lydia's parents are asking for mercy. They want to work out some kind of arrangement where she can eventually rebuild a relationship with Sophie." Vincent leaned back in his chair. "What kind of arrangement?" "They're prepared to establish a trust fund for Sophie's education and future needs. $2 million, with the stipulation that Lydia be allowed supervised visitation rights that could potentially expand as she completes treatment." $2 million. Vincent didn't need the money, but it would secure Sophie's future completely. It was also a tacit admission from Lydia's family that their daughter had been wrong, that Vincent had been the victim. "There's something else," Morrison added. "Lydia wants to write Sophie a letter. She wants to apologize, to try to explain why she did what she did. She's not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to give Sophie closure." Vincent considered this. Dr. Rivera had emphasized the importance of helping Sophie process her feelings about her mother. A letter might provide that opportunity. "I'll read the letter first," Vincent said finally. "If it's appropriate, I'll share it with Sophie. As for the visitation, we'll see how she does in treatment." That evening, Vincent sat in his study with Lydia's letter. Her handwriting was shaky, her words carefully chosen. "My dear Sophie, Daddy has probably told you that I made some very bad choices, and he's right. I hurt people I love, including you, and I'm very sorry for that. I want you to know that none of what happened was your fault. You are a beautiful, smart, wonderful little girl, and you deserve so much better than what I put you through. I'm sick, Sophie. Not the kind of sick where you have a fever, but the kind of sick that makes your thoughts confused and scary. I'm getting help for that sickness, and I hope someday I can be the mother you deserve. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. I always will, and I'm proud that you have Daddy to take care of you. He's a good man, and he loves you very much. Love always, Mommy." Vincent read the letter twice, then set it aside. It was honest, age-appropriate, and free of manipulation. More importantly, it acknowledged Vincent's role as Sophie's protector rather than undermining it. The next day, Vincent had a long conversation with Dr. Rivera about how to present the letter to Sophie. They decided to read it together during one of Sophie's therapy sessions, giving her a safe space to process her emotions. Sophie's reaction surprised Vincent. After Dr. Rivera finished reading the letter, his daughter was quiet for a long time. Then she looked up at Vincent with those serious blue eyes. "Daddy, can I write her back? What would you want to say? That I hope she gets better, and that I love her too, but I'm happy living with you." 6 months later, Vincent stood in a courtroom for Lydia's sentencing hearing. She'd pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for a sentence of 1 year in a psychiatric facility, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. Lydia looked different, thinner, older, but somehow more present than she'd been during their marriage. When Judge Hamilton asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, she stood and turned toward Vincent. "Your Honor, I'd like to apologize to my former husband and my daughter. I put them through hell because of my own mental illness and selfishness. Mr. Caldwell was right to protect Sophie from me, and I hope someday I can earn back a small part of their trust." Vincent said nothing, but he noticed that Lydia no longer referred to herself as Sophie's mother. She'd accepted that her actions had cost her that title. After the hearing, Lydia's parents approached Vincent in the hallway. Margaret Ashton looked older than her 68 years, worn down by her daughter's disgrace and the family's social humiliation. "Vincent," she said quietly, "we want to thank you for agreeing to the trust fund arrangement and for allowing Sophie to correspond with Lydia. Sophie deserves financial security," Vincent replied, "and she deserves the chance to understand her mother's illness without being victimized by it." "You could have destroyed us all," Margaret continued. "Our reputation, our business connections, everything. Instead, you've been remarkably restrained." Vincent looked at this woman who'd once considered him unworthy of her daughter. "Mrs. Ashton, I'm not interested in destroying innocent people. I protect what matters to me, and I eliminate threats to my family. You and your husband were never threats." As Vincent walked to his car, he reflected on the past year. He'd won completely, gained custody of Sophie, destroyed Lydia's plans, secured their financial future, and even managed to create a path for Sophie to have some relationship with her mother if she chose. But victory felt different than he'd expected. The man who'd once eliminated enemies without hesitation had found himself showing mercy to a woman who'd tried to destroy him. Perhaps Sophie's influence was making him softer. Or perhaps true strength lay in knowing when to show restraint. Either way, Vincent Caldwell had proven once again that he was not a man to be crossed. The story would become legend in their social circles, a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating a quiet man with dangerous skills. Chapter 8. New Foundations. 2 years after the divorce was finalized, Vincent stood in the kitchen of his new home, watching Sophie play with their German Shepherd puppy, Rex, in the backyard. They'd moved 6 months ago, leaving a house that held too many memories of deception and betrayal. This new place was different, smaller but warmer, chosen by Sophie after they'd looked at dozens of properties together. It had a bigger yard for Rex, a swimming pool, and most importantly, no shadows of the past. Sophie was 10 now, taller and more confident. The timid little girl who'd apologized through her drawings had grown into a thoughtful young woman who spoke her mind and trusted her instincts. Her weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Rivera had helped her process the trauma of her parents' divorce, and she seemed genuinely happy. The phone rang, interrupting Vincent's morning coffee. It was Dr. Rivera. "Vincent, I wanted to discuss Sophie's latest evaluation. She's doing remarkably well, better than most children who've experienced similar trauma. She's resilient," Vincent said, watching his daughter teach Rex to sit. "She is. But Vincent, she's also asked some pointed questions about her mother lately. She wants to know if she can visit Lydia." Vincent felt his chest tighten. Lydia had been released from psychiatric care 8 months ago and was living in a supervised halfway house in Connecticut. She completed her treatment program, held down a job at her parents' gallery, and adhered strictly to her probation requirements. More importantly, her monthly letters to Sophie had shown genuine growth. Gone was the manipulative woman who tried to turn their daughter into a weapon. In her place was someone who seemed to understand the harm she'd caused and was genuinely committed to change. "What's your professional opinion?" Vincent asked. "I think it could be beneficial for Sophie. She needs to see her mother as a real person, not just a villain from her childhood, but it would have to be carefully supervised and controlled." That evening, Vincent sat down with Sophie after dinner. She was reading a book about horses, her latest obsession, while Rex slept at her feet. "Sophie, Dr. Rivera says you've been asking about visiting Mommy." She looked up from her book, her expression serious. "I've been thinking about her. I know she did bad things, but I still love her. Is that wrong?" Vincent's heart ached for his daughter's confusion. "It's not wrong to love someone even when they've hurt you, sweetheart. Love doesn't just disappear because someone makes mistakes. Do you still love her? The question caught Vincent off guard. Did he still love Lydia? The woman who'd betrayed him was gone, replaced by someone who seemed genuinely remorseful. But love? That had died the moment he'd discovered her deception. I care about her as your mother, he said carefully. I want her to be healthy and safe, because that's what's best for you. But the love I had for her as my wife, that's gone, Sophie. Some things can't be repaired. Sophie nodded slowly. I understand, but I think I'd like to see her. Just to talk. The visit was arranged for the following Saturday at the halfway house. Vincent drove Sophie to Connecticut, both of them nervous for different reasons. The facility was clean but institutional, designed to ease former patients back into society. Lydia was waiting in the visitor's room, and Vincent was struck by how much she'd changed. Gone was the polished socialite he'd married. This woman wore simple clothes, minimal makeup, and carried herself with a humility he'd never seen before. Sophie, Lydia said softly, tears immediately filling her eyes. You've grown so much. Hi, Mommy, Sophie replied, suddenly shy. Vincent watched carefully as mother and daughter awkwardly hugged. A social worker supervised from across the room, taking notes on their interaction. I brought you something, Sophie said, pulling a drawing from her backpack. It showed a woman with long brown hair standing next to a rainbow. At the bottom, Sophie had written, Get well soon, Mommy. Lydia held the drawing like it was made of glass. It's beautiful, sweetheart. I'm going to hang it in my room. They talked for an hour about safe topics, Sophie's school, her friends, Rex the dog. Lydia asked careful questions and listened intently to every answer. She never tried to criticize Vincent or their new life, never attempted to guilt Sophie about the time they'd lost. Most importantly, she never asked Sophie to keep secrets or pass along messages to Vincent. As they prepared to leave, Lydia turned to Vincent. Thank you for bringing her. I know how difficult this must be for you. Sophie needed this, Vincent replied. She needs to understand who you are now, not just who you were. I'll never be able to undo the damage I caused, but I'm grateful for any chance to be part of her life, even if it's just visits like this. On the drive home, Sophie was unusually quiet. Finally, she spoke. Daddy, she seems different. How so? Sadder, but also nicer, like she really listened to me instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. Vincent nodded. People can change, Sophie. It doesn't excuse what they did wrong, but sometimes they can become better versions of themselves. Are you still angry at her? Vincent considered this question seriously. Was he still angry? The rage that had driven him to destroy Lydia's life had cooled over the years. What remained was a kind of cold pragmatism. He'd do whatever was necessary to protect Sophie, but he no longer felt the need to actively punish Lydia. I'm not angry anymore, he said finally, but I'm also not going to forget what happened. Trust has to be earned back slowly, and some things can never be completely forgiven. I think I understand. That night, Vincent sat in his study reviewing security reports from his company. Business was booming. His reputation for protecting clients from threats had only grown after word spread about how he'd handled his own domestic crisis. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Rivera. Sophie seems very positive about today's visit. I think monthly visits would be beneficial if you're comfortable with that. Vincent typed back, We'll try monthly visits for 6 months and reassess. As he set down his phone, Vincent realized something had shifted inside him. For 2 years, he'd been focused on protecting Sophie from her mother. Now, he was facilitating their relationship because Sophie needed it. The change surprised him. The man who'd once sworn never to forgive or forget was learning that true strength sometimes meant knowing when to show mercy. Not for the benefit of those who'd wronged him, but for the sake of the innocent people caught in the aftermath. Sophie needed her mother, and Vincent loved Sophie more than he hated Lydia. In the end, that love would guide his decisions, just as it always had. Chapter 9. Unbreakable Bonds. 5 years had passed since that first drawing that changed everything. Sophie was now 13, tall for her age with Vincent's determined jaw and his blue eyes that seemed to see everything. She was an honor student at Riverside Academy, captain of the equestrian team, and showed the same analytical mind that had made her father successful. Vincent watched from the fence as Sophie guided her horse, Aurora, through a complex jumping course. Her movements were precise, confident. She'd inherited his ability to remain calm under pressure. "She's remarkable," said a voice behind him. Vincent turned to see Dr. Rivera approaching, her hair now showing more gray, but her eyes as sharp as ever. "Amanda, what brings you to Sophie's practice? I wanted to talk to you about something. Sophie's been seeing me for 5 years now, and I think it's time to consider whether she still needs regular therapy." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "You're firing your patient?" "I'm graduating her. Sophie has processed her trauma remarkably well. She has a healthy relationship with both parents, she's academically and socially successful, and she's developed excellent coping mechanisms. Continued therapy might actually be counterproductive at this point." They watched Sophie complete her course flawlessly, then trot Aurora over to the fence where they stood. "Dad, did you see that last jump?" Aurora barely touched the rail. "I saw. You two make a good team." Sophie dismounted and began untacking Aurora. "Dr. Rivera, are you here to see me?" "Actually, I'm here to tell you that I think our regular sessions can come to an end. You've done all the hard work of healing, Sophie. You don't need me anymore." Sophie paused in loosening Aurora's girth. "Because I'm fixed?" "Because you were never broken," Dr. Rivera replied gently. "You were hurt, and you healed. That's what healthy people do." Later that evening, Vincent and Sophie sat on their back porch watching the sunset. Rex, now 5 years old and perfectly trained, lay at Sophie's feet. These quiet moments had become precious to Vincent. Time when they could simply exist together without the weight of the past pressing down on them. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever regret what you did to Mom? I mean, the way you destroyed her life?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment. This conversation had been inevitable, and he'd been preparing for it for years. "Sophie, I did what I thought was necessary to protect you. Your mother was trying to turn you against me and take you away. I couldn't let that happen. But you could have just gotten divorced. You didn't have to send her to prison. Your mother committed crimes, Sophie. She filed false police reports, tried to coach you to lie under oath, and attempted to defraud me financially. The prison sentence was a consequence of her choices, not my revenge." Sophie pulled her knees up to her chest. "I know. I understand that logically. But sometimes I wonder, if you could do it over again, would you handle it differently?" Vincent studied his daughter's face. She was asking whether he was the kind of man who destroyed people unnecessarily, whether his love for her had made him cruel. "If your mother had simply asked for a divorce, we could have worked out custody arrangements like civilized adults. If she'd been honest about her feelings about Ryan, about wanting a different life, I would have been hurt, but I would have tried to do what was best for you. But she didn't do that. No, she declared war on me, Sophie. She tried to take you away using lies and manipulation. And once someone declares war on Vincent Caldwell, he let the sentence hang in the air. You destroy them completely," Sophie finished. "I protect what matters to me. Always. Without exception." Sophie was quiet for several minutes, processing this. "The kids at school sometimes talk about you. They say you're scary, that their parents warn them not to cross the Caldwell family." Vincent felt a chill. "And what do you think about that?" "I think you're the safest person I know to love, because you do anything to protect the people you care about. But I also think you're the most dangerous person to betray." Her words were spoken matter-of-factly, without fear or judgment. Sophie understood exactly who her father was and had made peace with it. "Does that frighten you?" Vincent asked. "No, it makes me feel safe. But Dad, I also think Mom has suffered enough. She lost everything. Her home, her reputation, her daughter. She's been in therapy for 6 years now. She works at Grandpa's gallery and lives in a tiny apartment. Don't you think she's paid for what she did?" Vincent considered this. Lydia's monthly visits with Sophie had continued for 3 years now. She was punctual, respectful, and never overstepped boundaries. She asked about Sophie's life, but never pried. She sent appropriate birthday and Christmas gifts. She'd become harmless. "What are you asking, Sophie? I'd like to spend some real time with her. Maybe a weekend visit. I know it would have to be supervised, but I think I'm old enough now to handle it." Vincent's first instinct was to refuse. But as he looked at Sophie, 13 years old and wise beyond her years, he realized she wasn't asking out of childish sentimentality. She was making a mature decision about her relationship with her mother. "I'll consider it," he said finally. "Really? Really? But Sophie, you need to understand something. If your mother ever tries to manipulate you again, ever tries to turn you against me, or make you keep secrets, that relationship ends permanently. I won't give her a third chance to hurt you. I understand. And Dad, I would tell you if she did anything like that. I learned my lesson about keeping secrets." The weekend visit was arranged for the following month. Lydia would take Sophie to her parents' house in Connecticut for Saturday and Sunday, with a social worker checking in twice daily. Vincent drove Sophie to the meeting point, a neutral location where Lydia was waiting with her car. His ex-wife looked nervous but hopeful as Sophie hugged her goodbye. "Vincent," Lydia said quietly, "thank you for trusting me with this." "I'm not trusting you, Lydia. I'm trusting Sophie. Don't make me regret it." That weekend was the longest 48 hours of Vincent's life. He paced his house, cleaned his guns, reorganized his office, and generally drove himself crazy with worry. When Sophie finally called Sunday evening to say she was ready to come home, Vincent was in his car within minutes. "How was it?" he asked as they drove home. "Good. Different. We went to the museum, and Grandma made her famous pot roast. Mom and I talked a lot about everything. She told me about her mental illness, about how it made her think and feel. She explained why she did what she did without making excuses for it. And I think I understand her better now. She's still my mom, but she's also just a person who made terrible mistakes and is trying to be better." Vincent nodded. "That's a very mature way to look at it. Dad, she asked me to tell you something. She wanted me to say that she's grateful for the way you've handled everything. She knows she doesn't deserve your mercy, but she's grateful for it anyway." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that you're not merciful. You're practical, and that it's practical for me to have a relationship with my mother as long as she doesn't threaten our family." Vincent smiled despite himself. Sophie had inherited more than his eyes and determination. She'd inherited his ability to see situations clearly, without sentiment clouding her judgment. That night, as Vincent tucked Sophie into bed, a ritual they'd maintained despite her protests that she was too old, she looked up at him with those serious blue eyes. "Dad, I want you to know something. I love Mom, and I'm glad I can have a relationship with her. But you're my hero. You're the one who protected me when I needed protection. You're the one who taught me to be strong and honest and brave. You're the parent I want to be like when I grow up." Vincent felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Sophie, you're already everything I could have hoped for in a daughter. You're kind without being weak, strong without being cruel, and smart without being arrogant. You're better than I ever was. I learned from the best." As Vincent turned off Sophie's light and closed her door, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 8 years ago, a child's drawing had revealed a betrayal that nearly destroyed his family. His response had been swift, brutal, and complete, exactly what the situation required. But the real victory wasn't in destroying Lydia or Ryan or anyone else who'd threatened him. The real victory was the young woman sleeping safely in the room behind him, strong, confident, and completely secure in her father's love. Vincent Caldwell had spent his life protecting people and eliminating threats. But his greatest achievement would always be raising a daughter who understood the difference between strength and cruelty, between justice and revenge. Sophie would never need anyone to fight her battles for her. She would never be anyone's victim, and she would never, ever underestimate the power of a quiet man who loved his family more than his own life. The war was over. Love had won. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.